All right, let's talk about high-frequency jet ventilation. We all know managing our tiniest patients on the jet has its own unique set of challenges, right? Well, today, we're going to break down a really smart strategy for it, the Iowa Protocol. Think of this as a practical guide, walking you from the initial setup all the way to a successful extubation. We'll really get into the core ideas that make this whole thing work so well. Let's dive in.
Okay, so if you're going to master the Iowa Protocol, you have to get this one single idea burned into your brain. Everything we do, every single adjustment, serves this one core principle, giving that baby as much time to breathe out as possible. For these tiny, fragile lungs, stopping gas from getting trapped isn't just a nice idea, it's everything. It's how we prevent lung injury. This one concept is going to guide every single decision we make from here on out.
So here's our game plan. We're going to hit 4 key areas. First, getting those initial settings dialed in perfectly. Then, how to actually manage the patient based on their blood gases. After that, we'll get into diagnostics and what those alarms are really telling you. And finally, the end game, the strategy for weaning and extubate.
All right, Section 1, Initial Settings. Getting this right from the very beginning is absolutely crucial. It's going to save you a ton of headaches and adjustments later on.
So the protocol's rate selection is pretty slick because it's tailored right to the baby's physiology. Now look at this. For our smallest infants, the ones under 600 grams, we're actually using a slower rate, 300. And that's not random. It creates this beautiful 1:9 I to E ratio, which gives those high-resistance airways the absolute maximum time to just passively exhale. Then, you see, as the baby gets a little bigger and their lungs work a little better, we can safely bump up that rate and tighten the ratio.
So this number right here, this is a big one, 0.020 seconds. That is your inspiratory time. And here's the deal. It is fixed. You do not touch it. You do not increase it. This super short, sharp little puff of air is what makes the whole thing work, protecting those tiny little airways down deep. So just lock this number in your head. Okay, so we've got our rate and our inspiratory time locked in. Next up is the jet PEEP. Now, you might start at about 2 to 4 over the conventional PEEP they were on before, but the real target isn't a number on the screen. It's all about what you see. You're going to titrate that jet PEEP up until you get a visible, gentle vibration on the chest wall. That little chest wiggle is your sign that you're delivering enough pressure. That's your endpoint.
Remember, the jet ventilator never works alone. It's always got a conventional ventilator partnered up with it, providing some background support. Now, the critical piece here is the sigh breaths. We're setting them at a rate of 4 per minute. These are basically our recruitment maneuvers. They're so important for fighting off the atelectasis that can happen with the tiny tidal volumes on the jet. And then, of course, the PEEP is there to hold on to that lung volume once we get it.
All right, Section 2, Patient Management. So we're all set up. Now we get into the dynamic part, adjusting our settings based on what those blood gases are telling us.
This is probably one of the most important things to get right. You have to think of your job as 2 separate goals. First, ventilation. That's all about getting rid of CO2. And the main knob you turn for that is your Delta P. That's the difference between your jet PEEP and your PEEP. Second job, oxygenation. Managing that PaO2. That's all about mean airway pressure, which is mostly driven by your PEEP setting and, of course, your FiO2. You have to know which tool does which job.
Okay, so a blood gas comes back and the CO2 is high. What do? The protocol gives you a really clear playbook. Your first move, pretty much always, is to increase the jet PEEP. That makes your Delta P bigger, which helps clear out more CO2. Simple enough. Your second move, if their oxygenation is good, is you can try dropping the PEEP a little, which can also help. But that third step, that one makes you think a little differently. And that brings us to what's famously known as the Iowa paradox. Now, this feels totally backwards, right? To get the CO2 to go down, you turn the rate down. But just think back to that core principle. If the baby is hyperinflated and trapping gas, slowing down the rate gives them more time to breathe out. That reduces the trapping, makes gas exchange better, and boom, the CO2 comes down. It's a seriously powerful tool, especially for our tiniest kids.
Okay, let's switch gears to oxygenation. So, if your patient is hypoxic, your main tool is to increase the PEEP. That raises your mean airway pressure and helps recruit more of the lung. But, and this is a big but, it comes with one golden rule that you absolutely cannot forget. You must keep your Delta P the same, otherwise you're going to totally mess up your ventilation.
Let me just say that again to make it crystal clear because it's that important. If you go up by 1 on your PEEP, you must go up by 1 on your jet PEEP. If you increase PEEP by 2, you have to increase jet PEEP by 2.
This keeps your Delta P exactly the same, which means your CO2 removal stays stable while you're working on fixing the oxygenation. If you forget this step, you will immediately make that baby retain CO2.
Okay, Section 3, Diagnostics and Alarms. Let's learn how to decode what the ventilator is trying to tell us. We'll focus on servo pressure and some of those common alarms we all hear.
The servo pressure is basically your window into the baby's lungs. Think of it like an effort meter for the machine. If the servo is rising, that means the vent needs more flow to hit its target pressure. And usually that's great news. It means the lungs are getting better, compliance is improving, and that's your signal to start weaning the PIP. But on the flip side, if the servo is falling, that's a warning. It means something's wrong. The lungs are getting stiffer, there might be an obstruction, or even a pneumo. That's your cue to get to the bedside and assess that patient fast.
Okay, alarms. You hear loss of PIP. First thing, don't panic. This just means that the little monitoring line that reads the pressure at the end of the ET tube is reading too low. 9 times out of 10, it's a simple connection issue. Check your triple point where all the lines come together, look for disconnects, kinks, water in the tubing, you know the drill. Of course, if the baby looks unstable, don't waste time, just disconnect and bag them up while you figure it out.
Now the cannot meet PIP alarm. This one's a bit more urgent. This means the machine is giving it everything it's got, max flow, but it still can't build up enough pressure. This usually points to a massive leak, and your first thought should always be, is the tube still in? Check that ETT depth immediately. If the tube is secure, then start checking your gas connections all the way back to the wall.
And finally, Section 4, Weaning and Extubation. The patient is getting better, we're seeing good signs. Now we need a systematic way to get them off the ventilator and breathing on their own.
Weaning follows a very logical order. You don't just randomly turn things down. First, as those lungs get better, and you'll see that as a rising servo pressure, you start weaning the jet PIP to keep the CO2 in a good range. That's step 1. At the same time, you're working on the FiO2, trying to get it below 30%. Only after those are down can you start slowly, gradually reducing the PEEP. This whole sequence is designed to make sure we don't lose all that good lung volume we worked so hard to get.
And this brings us right to the finish line. How do we know they're ready to go? Well, the criteria are super clear. You're looking for a jet PIP under about 15 to 18, a mean airway pressure under 8 to 10, and an FiO2 below 30%. Once you've hit all those targets, it's go time. You extubate straight to non-invasive support, like nasal CPAP or NIPV, to keep those lungs open.
So, that's our tour of the Iowa protocol. As you can see, it's a powerful system, but it's all built on that one simple protective idea. So, I'll leave you with a question to think about during your next shift. How can this core philosophy of always prioritizing expiratory time change how you think about ventilation, not just on the jet, but on every single ventilator you use? Thanks for listening.